Hello, welcome to Chat with Dr. Kat. I'm Dr. Kat. It's wonderful to see you today. Very excited about our guest, Rob Scheer. He is an expert when it comes to foster care children, what they're feeling, what's in their soul, what affects them. He brings that from his own personal history, and I'm really, really excited to hear more about this. He has a company where he has developed backpacks for these children rather than putting all their things in the black trash bags. Is an international nonprofit called Comfort Cases. Welcome, Rob. I'm so happy to have you today. Really happy to have you today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to have this conversation.
Tell me, you do have that history. I want you to share with everybody your history of foster care, what it did to you, the feelings that you had back then, and how it's impacted you today.
The first thing I have to say is I want to say thank you for giving me this platform because I think any time that we have an opportunity to educate our community and
Yes.
let your listeners know, one, your community is not your zip code, my friends. Your community is our
Yes.
human race. And I felt that firsthand. See, my story is not like most people. I'm the youngest of 10 kids. My mother had been married 6 times. We lived in and out of every shelter in Maryland, Virginia, DC. I don't remember a picture on the wall. I don't remember a birthday cake. I don't ever remember her saying, I love you. But I remember the monster she allowed to live in the house. And that was
Yes.
my dad. My dad. Firsthand to know that, someone who was supposed to protect you would allow harm to be done. As a young boy, foster care had already started to be talked about in my family. My brothers and sisters were falling to the wayside: teenage pregnancy, drug addiction, incarceration.
Sure.
We know the statistics in the United States is when you put the F word in front of a child's name, less than. We know that the statistics show us one child every 2 minutes in the United States, 700 a day, enter a system that we created, a system that was
Wow.
created to take care of our children. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
I know that.
Let me ask you, when you look at foster care, I think people have preconceived notions of foster care. They have their thoughts. You've got some people that say, oh, this was my experience, some really horrible, some okay. But there's this whole thing about this trash bag, that there is no luggage, no anything. Oftentimes you come with a large trash bag, maybe you leave with a small trash bag.
Yeah.
What is it about the trash bag and feeling that everything you own is just in this black trash bag?
Yeah. I mean, the sad part is, though, is that I don't. First of all, I've never met a social worker, and I've met social workers all over this country and now all over the world that were international. I have never met a social worker who wants to give a kid in foster care a trash bag.
Yeah.
The problem is, and let's talk about this, we all know that when children are removed out of their homes of origin, it's done in such a quick way. Okay.
Yeah.
So many times you're going into low income areas where they don't have suitcases and luggage. And so they're grabbing the first thing that they can grab. Okay. So let's understand that part of it. So for me, we know that this is happening. We know this is happening. And by the way, I came in the system in the 70s. So we knew in the 70s trash bags were given. They gave them to me again in the 80s. My kids arrived 17 and a half years ago, trash bags. My oldest son arrived in 2019. And even though we have this nonprofit trash bag, so we at Comfort Cases, we decided 14 years ago, this wasn't going to happen any longer on our watch, that we were truly going to be the organization that went around our country and we educated people about kids like me.
Mm-hmm.
We let people know that kids in foster care enter because of a choice that someone else made. We also must
Right.
understand that there is no such thing as a bad kid. It's
Yeah.
only a kid that needs to be redirected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our
It's
kids.
so true. It's so true. I really like that you said that because, we oftentimes look at kids, their behaviors and different things, even if somebody has some type of disorder that's leading them to a behavioral issue. it still can be worked out. It can be, giving them extra tools and skills to learn different ways to approach things. But oftentimes, when they're going from place to place to place and they don't have the consistency, right? They don't have that consistency. But I want to ask you, when you started Comfort Cases and you said, your child even came in 2019.
My oldest son, by the
Your
way.
oldest son, 2019, and still with the trash bag. But then at the same time, you're one of 10. Even if somebody had a suitcase, you're not going to have 10 suitcases lined up for 10 kids. So with Comfort Cases, there's also this level of dignity that comes along with wanting to have something that's their own.
Their own.
Yeah, their own. Let's talk
Their
about
own.
that. Tell me about the dignity that goes along with that.
So you know what I have, so when our children are, so first of all, I gotta go back a little bit. So
Please.
in 1985, in 1984, the fall of 1984, I turned 18 years old. I had made it to my senior year in high school. And by the way, nobody in my family had graduated. And my parents didn't even have an eighth grade level. So to have somebody that was in 12th grade, and now that, I don't want to say I'm an expert in foster care, but now that I know foster care, I know that only 54% of the 400,000 kids will actually graduate high school. So the fact that I
Wow.
made it to that fall day in 1984, but when I came home, and by the way, I say home because I thought that was my home.
Hmm.
I called them mom, I called them dad, even though they never put a picture of me on the mantle, even though they never let me go to camp or join any sports, and they always allowed their three biological kids to do all that crap, but never allowed me. They had
Oh,
to have loved me.
yeah.
I lived in their house. I called them mom and dad. But when I walked into that house, Dr. K, I will tell you what happened. My trash bag was sitting there,
Oh,
had
wow.
all my clothes in it. I hadn't seen it since I was 12 years old. Hadn't thought about a trash bag. But there they had put my stuff. And they informed me that I no longer had a place to live because I was 18 and they weren't going to receive a check.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
Hmm.
to understand the fact that we have 20,000 children average every year age out of foster care, 70% of those kids become homeless within 24 hours, like me. The reason we don't talk about it, the reason you don't see it, because we're scared. We do not stand on the street corners. We hang out at the malls, the public libraries. And by the way, I'm tired of people saying, why don't we tell people? Let me explain to you why we tell people. You stick us in psychiatric hospitals, reform schools, detention centers. You think we're the problem of your community? Your gangs continue to grow. I will let you all know you created us. You
Hmm.
created us. And
Hmm.
because you didn't step up and love us when we needed to be loved, we go and find that love in other places.
So
For
true.
me at Comfort Cases, I want them to know when they walk into the system, I see them, I know they're there, and I love them.
It's really interesting. About a week ago, I had a phone call from one of my own people that I work with. And she's telling me about what is going on with, her younger siblings. And one of them is 18, but in high school, which happens. Everybody's holding their kids back now. So they're in high school, 18, 19 years old. Anyway, there's a whole situation. I don't want to identify too much, but this kid needs to be taken to a different place or some type of intervention needs to come in. Now, I'm not working with this child. I'm not a mandated reporter in this situation because the child is 18.
Right.
Here was my experience. This was just last week. So it's just ironic that I'm working with you this week because last week I called. I called the school and the response I got was, and now why, let me go back. Why I went to the school is because that child is now 18 years old, right? So the child is, what can Child
Yep.
Protective Services do? Okay, I still went to them as well. But with this child, I called the school and the nurse tells me, I'm still in shock. The nurse tells me, well, how do I know who you are? And I said, well, you don't. And this is going to be anonymous. I just need to give you the information. I said, because, you know, I can't have anything identified with the person who is giving me the information. But this is what it is. She wouldn't take the report. She wouldn't take it. And I just said, legally, and I went through this whole thing, said all the right stuff. Legally, you're supposed to do this. I had to wind up hanging up with her. I got her name, went ahead, called the vice principal, got at least some action. But then I went to Child Protective Services and I said, this is what's happening. And she says, nothing I can do. She's 18. I said, I understand, but she's still in high school and a dependent kid. She's 18. There's nothing we can do. And I said, well, I know there's another report out there. And she goes, well, anyway, it went on. Finally, she said to me, I kind of try to pull on her heartstrings a little bit. And she says, okay, let's go the path of the adult dependent person, and maybe adult dependent abuse. Okay. Nothing happened.
And by the way, Doctor, I have to tell you this. So in 2019, I walked into a local high school where I live. And I walked up on stage and I told my story. This part of the story I shared with you about a 12-year-old little boy who had walked into foster care, who was handed a black trash bag and was given no hope.
Yeah.
I talked about that, and I talked about how at 18 I'd aged out and became homeless. And as I walked off that stage, a young boy walked up to me. He said, Mr. Scheer, will you sign my book? I said, of course. What's your name? He said, Alex. I said, Alex, tell me something about yourself. He says, I have nothing to tell. I said, Alex, we all have a story. He said, no, my story's like yours. I'm 18 years old. I've been in foster care since I was 5, been in 11 homes, 6 schools. I am 18. I'm aged out, and I'm getting ready to be homeless. That hit me so hard.
Oh, I bet.
I said, Alex, it doesn't have to go that way. I looked at the principal, and she had a tear going down her eye. She said, Mr. Scheer, Alex has a 3.6, and we don't know what to do. I handed Alex my business card, and I said, I want you to call me. We're gonna figure this out. And by the way, I had 4 kids, very active life, a public speaker, an author, traveling the world to educate people. And here this young boy just wanted me to hear his story.
See him.
And I went home.
Yeah.
And I went home and I told Reece and I told the kids. And one of my kids was like, Dad, if he calls, invite him to our house for dinner. And I was like, what a good idea. And sure enough, Alex called me the next day. He was like, hey, Mr. Scheer, this is Alex. Do you remember me? I said, I'm not that old. I said, Alex, give me the phone number to your foster parents. I said, I want to call them and have you over for our house for dinner. And I remember he said, do I get to meet the family you write about in your book? I was like, yeah. I was like, I don't have a fake family.
Right.
So I picked him up on that Saturday and I brought him to our house to hang out, and he was going to have dinner. And I watched him. He was in the backyard with the other kids. And Reece was like, you know what? Let's go out to dinner tonight. And I was like, what a great idea. And so we gathered the kids. We went down to the local Mexican restaurant. We go and we eat there probably once a week. We sat down. My son, Tristan, he was 10. He looked at he looked at Alex and he said, Alex, you can order anything off the menus and my dads don't care. And he was like, I can order anything. He's like, I'm getting the steak fajitas. And if I don't eat them all, I never get in trouble. My daughter, Amaya, looked at Alex and said, Alex, haven't you ever been to Guapo's? Alex looked at my kids and said, I don't remember the last time I came to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me tell you something. As a dad, I realized I'd done my job because I saw the empathy flow out of my children's eyes. We ate, went to Dave & Buster's, dropped Alex off at his foster parents' house. I get in the car and the car's quiet. And all of a sudden, one of my kids said, Dad, we have to do something for Alex. I said, I know, guys. I just don't know what to do. And my kid said, Dad, we have to bring him home. And I was like, what? And I looked at my husband. My husband said, what's one more? My husband and I were the very first couple in the state of Maryland to petition the courts to have a child from foster care come and live with us without a stipend. The judge said to me, Mr. Scheer, why would you do this? I say to the judge, as I say to every one of your listeners, every child deserves a foundation. Every child deserves to know there's someone they're rooting them on. Every child deserves to know what it feels like to be loved unconditionally. See, I looked at my son. He was crying. He said, Pops, you have changed my life. I said, no, buddy, you changed our lives. I said, I only have one regret. The judge said, Mr. Scheer, what is your regret? I said, I didn't walk him to kindergarten. But now I get to walk with him for the rest of his life. A year after that moment, Dr. K, Alex says, Pops, will you adopt me? And I said, Alex, why? I said, you're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the height of the pandemic at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, Pops, I want to have the same last name as you and Dada and my sister and brothers. I called my adoption attorney and we adopted Alex. Our kids are now 25, 21, 19, 19, and 17.
That's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
That is. That's a very beautiful, beautiful story. I mean, you've changed the life of this beautiful kid for the rest of his life. I say this too to teachers, even on a smaller scale. What you did was unbelievable for him. But in the school setting, whether you see a kid that's struggling, if you could be that one person in that kid's life that could change the trajectory of where they're going just with love and understanding. But on this level, oh my goodness, what a beautiful story.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. And, kids do. They want to be seen. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to know that people love them. But I think that's the root of all humanity. People just want to be loved, and
They do.
and they want to feel like they belong.
They do, and I think that we forget that. I think, I've always said this. I mean, first I have to realize, I age out of foster care. I'm homeless my entire senior year of high school. I end up graduating high school. I joined the United States Navy. I became a very successful businessman, and I never looked back because I thought this was all about me. And I
Hmm.
was like, you know what? You all failed me when I was a young boy, and you failed me when I was in my early 20s, and this is now my time. And that's what it was all about. I bought the big house, I bought the expensive cars, filled my bank with money until 17 and a half years ago when I knew what I wanted in my life, and that was to be a dad. And I remember I said that to my husband 21 years ago when we went on our first date. I said, you want to have kids? And he was like, are you kidding? He was like, that's a crazy question to ask on a first date. I said,
But
well,
why
listen,
go
I'm not
further
gonna.
if yeah, don't waste my time.
I said, well, guess what? If your answer is what I want to hear, you're not getting a second date from me. Well, by the
Right.
way, I've been with him 21 years now. So he said he did. And so, 17 and a half years ago, when Reese and I decided to build our family, I did want to build it. The one cute little kid in this
Hmm.
expensive stroller living in DC, the cute gay couple. But when these kids arrived carrying a trash bag from foster care, I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
That was the light bulb moment that I realized that I no longer wanted a job. I
Hmm.
needed a purpose. And my
Hmm.
purpose was to, one, be the best dad I could ever be to these four amazing humans and now five, but to
Yeah.
also be the best human and the best leader. So when I lead by example, my kids look at me and say, you know what? My dad, he didn't talk about it. My dad did it.
Yeah.
That's what we all need to do. Do it.
It is. It's makes an entirely different situation. You come to a crossroads, and oftentimes this is what people don't realize is that they do have that ability to make a choice to go down a different path. Several times people keep themselves in that victim place, and the fact that you've shown what you've come from and what you have now done for your life and the life of these your children is wonderful. That for everyone to realize you have a choice. You
You
have a
do.
choice.
Oh, thank you for saying that because this is the thing that people don't realize. For me, I hear it all the time. My mother was a product of her environment. My mother was married 6 times. My mother had 10 kids. My
Yeah.
mother was a drug addict. My mother was a product of her environment, the environment she was in. BS.
Hmm.
My mother was a product of her choices.
Yeah.
Understand that. We are all products of our choices. Now, mind you, those choices are not always the best. They're not always easy. They're not, but
Correct.
we have to realize that we are a product of them. And by the way, I've made some bad choices in my life.
Hmm.
I've had 4 suicide attempts. I stuck myself in a psychiatric hospital many times because I couldn't deal with my trauma.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I was 24 years old, okay, realizing all the bad choices I had been making. And what I did, I made the choice to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
I came out of a hospital after my fourth suicide attempt. And again, I remember lying in that hospital bill, looking up at the sky and saying, well, damn it, Rob, you can't even get this right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember that. I got out of that hospital and I went and found my mother's grave. I don't think my father was there, my mother's grave. And I remember I went to that grave. By the way, she didn't even have a headstone.
Mm.
There was just a little silver slip that the graveyard attendant helped me find her. They had a number and all, they had a
Mm-hmm.
search. But anyway, um, I dropped to my knees and I forgave her. I forgave her for not protecting me. Forgave her for opening that bathroom door and handing me to my dad with that billow of steam coming out, knowing that he was raping me.
Mm-hmm.
I forgave her,
Mm-hmm.
but I told her that I'm forgiving you, not for you to rest more comfortably in this ground, but for me
Yeah.
to take the power back. And by the way, I've never once thought from that day to ever in my life. I have not taken a drug from that day. I have realized that my life is valuable and I have a purpose. But forgiveness is what freed me. And forgiveness was for me, not for them. And that's what
Right.
people need to understand. Forgiveness is for yourself to take the power back. The power is so strong.
You know, what you just said is absolutely correct. Most people do see forgiveness sometimes as a weakness of allowing that person to get off scot-free for some of the most atrocious things. And what you just mentioned and what you went through, atrocious. But forgiveness is about you and you experiencing that. And it is a choice. It's a choice to break free of the shackles of this trauma. And, sometimes going through trauma work and reducing everything down to a choice, because so many people are attached to, I don't have a choice. It's in their everyday speech. Well, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. And really, if you stop and look at the other choices in your life, even simple, I hate my job. I'm struggling. I have to go to work every day. I hate it. Well, what's the alternative? You don't have money coming in. You lose your house. You lose your apartment. And you start dwindling it down to the point where you're homeless. Make the choice to get up and go to work, and maybe make the choice to find a different career. If you're unhappy, change it, but be smart about it. Empower. And I think you are just the representation of gaining that power and letting go of that past trauma that keeps us. There's one other thing I want to bring up, because the trauma that you experienced was so intense, and the power you've come from in accepting your choice. Post-traumatic stress disorder can be one of the easiest disorders to treat if the person allows themselves to see the power of choice in leaving that trauma behind.
Yes. And by the way,
and you embody that.
Yeah, I'm a true believer in that.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've said this. I said this to my siblings. I don't have a relationship with them because I'm not blaming the system. I'm going to change the system. Because if you sit there and start doing the blame game, nothing gets resolved.
Right.
Nothing gets resolved. And by the way, kids in foster care, they actually suffer post-traumatic stress disorder twice the rate as our combat veterans coming back from the front line. Why aren't we talking about that?
Right.
And I can tell you that firsthand. And still at 59 years old, I still get triggers from things when I was younger. And one of the things, cigarette smoke.
Uh-huh.
My biological father was a huge cigarette smoker and used to put cigarettes out on us. He would walk in the front door, we would hear him, and we would all say, God, don't let today be the day he calls my name. And he would call my name, Robert Terry. And I would run to the kitchen, to the refrigerator, and I would grab that Pabst Blue Ribbon, and I would run back to that chair. And it didn't matter how fast I ran. My little legs at 2 and 7 and 9, he would take that cherry of that cigarette and he'd tap it on us, tap it on our leg, on our, I mean, on my cheek,
Oh, terrible.
tap it. That was my dad.
You know, our
So when I
strongest,
smell that
yeah,
cigarette smoke, by the way,
yeah,
Dr. Kate, when I smell that cigarette smoke, and by the way, I
it's a
was a
trigger.
smoker. I was a smoker. But now, for some reason, if I get that smell, I think of my dad. I don't think of me as a smoker. I think of my dad.
Yeah. Well, our strongest link to memory is smell. And so when we when you walk in, and that's why a lot of times, if you're looking for a new home and realtors will say, I put cookies in the oven. It should be this like nostalgia, right? And it brings it back. Or my kids always joke with me when we travel. Sometimes they're so funny. I'll say, smells like Europe in here. And it's usually old water, old moldy building because their buildings are so old. But it's nostalgic for me, and it reminds me of my dad who's passed because, we would travel. And, so when you have this trauma, and there's different things, when I look back to certain experiences I've had, yes, absolutely. I smell things and I'm like, oh God, and it does. It's a physical reaction. So it's interesting that it triggers that, and yet you had smoked for a while, but
Yeah,
that's what our brain does,
it does. It does.
It does. It taps into things. So let me ask you this, because you have all these beautiful children and this wonderful family. What was it through your own choices that you decided to be a different type of dad? Now, you could have fallen back into some patterns.
Oh, of course.
So,
Look what was my role models.
right.
Let's talk about the fact of my role models from my family of origin. Let's talk about my foster parent role model. My foster father would
Yes,
spit on me. He thought that was funny. That was a joke for his boys, hold them down and spit, so that was abuse.
it was. Yeah.
So I didn't have any role models as father figures at all. And I remember, I think I wrote about this I did write about this in my memoir, and I haven't said this on many podcasts, but I was mad at my husband when our children arrived that first night. Because when he picked up our son at the time, he was the youngest, Tristan, Mackay, he was 2 when he arrived. I immediately saw that bond between the two of them when he looked at him, when he was holding him. And I was, why don't I feel that?
Yeah.
Why don't I, and I remember saying to Reece that night after getting the kids to sleep, I didn't feel that connection at first.
Yeah.
And I wanted that so bad because I was the one that wanted. My husband wanted to be a dad. And by the way, my husband gave up his career to be a stay-at-home father. He's been a stay-at-home dad for 15 years raising our children. So he has the hardest job in the world. But he had that, and I didn't have that. But I had some amazing role models in my life. My husband is my. You read my memoir, people say it all the time. It's like a love story. My husband grew up in Kansas, totally opposite than me. His parents have been married 50 some years before my father-in-law passed away. They, grew up in the church. My husband's amazing, like different than me. I'm a broken, bruised, battered person. And he said, but I say it all the time. He made me the man I am today. He has given me grace when I needed grace, but he has also held me to the line when I needed to be held to the line.
Yeah.
And I also realized at the same time, it's okay to have therapy. And by the way, it's okay to have therapy twice a week if you need to, because I did when my kids first arrived, because I was worried. I didn't want to be that man that I saw. I wanted to be the man that I knew. The man that I knew that could love someone unconditionally without hands, that could love someone with kind words, that could love with someone by building them up. All of the things I never had.
Right. When you talk about that attachment, when you look at your child for the first time, a lot of times parents feel that it's going to be this, you're hearing little twinkly lights and you're seeing them and you're looking and you're going to have this instant connection. It doesn't always happen. But here's the thing. When you've gone through what you've gone through, you don't know proper attachment. So you don't know what that attachment feels like or looks like. Your husband did. He knew what attachment was. So when he looked, it was that instant connection. Yours became another choice to look at things
Yeah.
differently. And like you said, I wanted to, parent without hands. I wanted to do all this. And your choice came from being a better person. But this is something that oftentimes people don't talk about, is that when you look at your past, that's why we see generational trauma that continues to occur, because we automatically assume that we should be attached when you've had trauma. But you have to learn it, you have to accept it, and
Exactly.
you have to choose it. So
Yes.
more power to you on that, because
Thank you.
it could have been an
Yeah,
entirely different
it could have,
story.
and when the kids arrived, and the couple of years had gone by, and we realized that the birth parents weren't doing anything, so we actually filed for adoption and adopted all four of the kids. And as we were going through that journey of adopting them, we had to get bonding study experts. I had to
Mm-hmm.
bring in somebody to state that Reese and I weren't going to turn our boys gay, and we had to bring in an expert who said just because we were white guys, we weren't going to turn our four black kids white. And but after the judge said we were going to be their
Mm-hmm.
parents forever, I failed my kids because I was too concerned about the materialistic things.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately put them in private schools, put them in designer clothes, got them passports, took them on planes, trips, Disney World, all that stuff. And then 14 years ago, I'm sitting in my office right outside of DC, and my husband had come in because Reese and I, Reese would plan these toy drives with my company, and I had companies all over the country, and he would plan these toy drives with my company for our employees to gather all these toys for those needy kids, and we'd pat ourselves on the back because we collect all these toys, and then on the 26th of December, we'd wake up, half of the toys would be broken, and we wouldn't even think about the kids. And I remember one of my kids, we had done something rather large that was like very expensive. And my one kid, and I'm not going to say which one it was very ungrateful. And I remember, like, I was mad because I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I've worked so hard. I have picked myself up from nothing to give you all of this. And he was ungrateful. And I remember when Reese came into my office and said, Reese, we failed our kids. And he was like, what are you talking about? He said, our kids are amazing. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
please, we're raising entitled children. I said, we have forgotten to teach our kids two of the most important things. He said, what is that? I said, we forgot to teach our kids legacy. See, the fact is, legacy is not in our DNA. And legacy empathy isn't in our DNA. Legacy, we have to let people know it's about what we give and not what we take.
Right.
And then empathy. Empathy, not in your DNA.
Right.
And I forgot to teach my kids empathy. And I remember Reese said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to eliminate trash bags. And by the way, Dr. K, I'm getting ready to pull something out that's going to shock you. I pulled out this very trash bag. See, the thing is, I don't let it go far away from me. I don't want to forget where I came from, and I don't want my children to be embarrassed of where they came from.
That was your trash bag?
This was a trash bag that I had put in my desk 15 years ago
Oh, wow.
because I was having a hard time
Mm-hmm.
dealing with my past.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pulled it out and I laid it on the desk and I said, Reese, I'm going to eliminate these in DC foster care. He said, you are BS crazy.
Right.
I said, I know, that's why you married me. So we gathered members of our church, some local politicians, my senior staff, and I shared the story. The story of a 12-year-old little boy who was put into a system carrying a trash bag. That boy who was given no dignity, no hope. And then at 18, for a community to turn their back on him and hand him a trash bag again just because his birth date. And then for him to be homeless. And then for him to graduate and go in the Navy and become a very successful businessman. But then I started thinking about the need of kids and about how when my daughter arrived, she didn't even have a brand new pair of pajamas. And it wasn't until she tore that tag off on those pajamas that night that she smiled for the very first time that day.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said, Amaya, why are you smiling? And she said, Mr. Rob, I've never owned a new pair of pajamas before. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable that kids come in a system because of a choice that someone else made and we can't even give them a brand new pair of pajamas.
Mm-hmm.
But then I wanted to make sure that every kid got their own lotion, their own shampoo, their own conditioner, and their own bar of soap. These kids walk into a house of strangers. We expect them to assimilate like that. And by the way, each and every one of your viewers and listeners have actually stayed in a hotel, I guarantee you.
Right.
And when they stay in those hotels, they get a brand new bar of soap.
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's dignity.
Mm-hmm.
They would never use a stranger's bar of soap.
No.
Well, why do we make kids in foster care do that? Then I want every kid to get a toothbrush and toothpaste. And by the way, my beautiful teeth, and you know my teeth are beautiful. They they cost me an arm and a leg because when I was in the system,
Mm-hmm.
nobody bothered to give me a toothbrush. Then I want every kid to get an activity.
Mm-hmm.
90% of our kids who enter foster care enter in the back of a police cruiser.
Mm-hmm.
They go to a holding center. You can call them a rainbow room, light bright, or whatever you want to make you feel better. These are holding cells.
Yeah.
They have broken toys, broken crayons, ripped up books. I want these kids to have something of their own.
Yes.
I have kids under the age of 10 to get coloring books and crayons, kids over the age of 10 to get a journal and a pen and pencil set. About 8 years ago, the Pediatric Association came out with a study, and they said that children in foster care and that are adopted who journal will actually test higher than other kids. No shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could have called me. I could have told you that and saved you all those millions.
Right.
Then I want all girls over the age of 10 to have feminine products.
Yes, so
See,
important.
I have a daughter, and when I remember when she started her period, I couldn't imagine that she lived in a house of strangers, and we have to empower our young women.
Yes.
And by the way, gentlemen, you must be an ally to our women who are menstruating, because without a menstrual cycle, we would not be here.
Very
so
true.
We have actually developed an entire kit for our young women. The pamphlet talks about their flow, that it's heavy, their light flow, because I want these young women to know that I stand next to them during their menstrual cycle, and we want to empower them. I give kids over the age of 10 deodorant. We make sure that kids get an age-appropriate book. And by the way, as an author, there's no such thing as a used book. It's only a book that's been loved.
Exactly.
And then I want every kid to get a stuffy, because I don't care whether you're a newborn or you're 59. You know we all love a good stuffed animal.
Very true.
Finally, my son Grayson, he was 5 when we packed our very first case. He's now 19. He said, "Daddy, we have to put a blankie in every case." And I was like, "A blankie?" I was like, "Grayson, you know these kids are not cold." He said, "I know, Daddy. But every time they wrap themselves up in their blankie, they know we love them."
Mm-hmm.
Wow. My friend, that's what we want.
I love
We want
that.
to be loved. We want to know we matter. And so with that, we packed a case and another. And in the last 14 years, with the help of some amazing humans, we have packed and delivered over 320,000 backpacks. We have delivered them to all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. And in 2021, during the height of the pandemic, my family was in the UK opening up a center there where we serve close to 80,000 children in the United Kingdom.
Oh, wow. That is wonderful. It is. It's wonderful. It's the simple things. You know, you've said a few things that just really stuck with me, you know, that with our children, and a lot of times, you know, we want to give them everything, but the best gift we can give them is absolutely empathy, the gift of giving to others, while you can also reap the benefits of your own success, absolutely, but don't forget other people. It's so important. You know, my daughters went to Montessori. Montessori is a big thing with us, especially with my father. He was an author and an expert in Montessori, so it just kind of carried down. And one of her biggest points is that we're not born with empathy. You're absolutely right. We're not born with it. You need to be taught. There's certain children that sometimes, you know, if you see a baby crying and another baby starts to cry, that's the development that is coming. And sometimes it can be stronger in other people than in other ones. But we need to show our children empathy and describe where people are coming from. And oftentimes, you know, we're not seeing what's going on. When you see a kid who's misbehaving, and this kind of taps back onto what you had said at the beginning, was that, you know, kids just need to be redirected. But when you see someone acting the way they are, or they're not being kind, or they're being vicious, or they're being a bully. Yeah, you don't want to be treated like that. You don't want to be treated poorly, but at the same time, take a moment to say to yourself, what could be going on in their life that would make them behave that way? Right? What is going on there? And if you became that person's friend, or you set some boundaries, but you still took some time to have some empathy rather than hate or, disregard. And, so many kids now are just mainstreamed in. The other thing that you said that really touched me was that your foster family, you called them mom and dad. You had to
Yeah.
sit there and witness the other ones participating in sports where you couldn't, but you thought that was love because it was better than what you had come from. And then the moment you're 18, they reminded you of where you came from. Wow. Wow.
And by the way, let me give you a full circle moment. So I left that at 18, became homeless, scoured my way up the top. In my late 20s, I found my foster parents. I forgave them.
Wonderful.
I started building a relationship with them. I introduced them to my husband. I introduced them to my children. And then I wrote my memoir. And I remember out of respect, I sent
Yeah.
my memoir copy to my foster mother. I loved her. I still love her.
Yeah.
I told my truth in this memoir. But in this truth, I told the truth of my foster parents.
Yeah.
But I also told the truth of my mother, who was a physically, mentally abused person by her spouse. So it was very hard for her with her biological kids and this foster kid. And so but when she realized that this book was coming out, instead of saying to me, don't do this book, she just cut me and my kids off, even though they called her nanny. Yeah. People are not all great.
No,
But you know
they're
what?
not.
I forgave.
You have to continue to forgive. I mean, this is kind of a strong statement, but sometimes people come in and out of our lives, and when they disappear for a while, it's usually because they're shedding their skin to become even bigger snakes. And once someone shows you who they are, that famous statement, believe them. And, as people, we want to be loved. And sometimes we chase after people to get that love because we can't understand, why don't you love me? Or we give people a value spot when they give us a placement of an option in their life. And we just need to get to a place where we love ourselves. We love who's around us. Choose wisely. Choose wisely. And also make the choice that when they walk away, it's for a reason.
Yes.
It's for a reason. It can still bring us pain and suffering, but it's for a reason. And, when you were talking about how you brought them back into your life and everything else, I wanted to say, did you finally get the acknowledgement of, but then when you ended it the way you did, clearly not. Hopefully that they stumble on some of these podcasts and stumble on some of the things because, they can choose to be better.
It's very hard to live in where we live and not know Dr. Rob Scheer. So,
Right.
And the reason for that is because I owe that to our children. And I owe that, by the way, to the 400,000 children in foster care. And as I said before, Nelson Mandela has said this so clear. Each and every one of us are judged in society by the way we treat our children.
Yes.
Kids in foster care do not belong to you or your viewers. They do not belong to me. They belong to us.
Right.
To us.
Exactly. I've really done my best as a parent, somebody in my community. You hit home with the pajama. Since we had a mommy group, when my kids were really little, And I started this drive with this other mom, and it was linked to domestic violence because
Mm.
domestic violence, they escape in the middle of the night. And oftentimes, they're throwing things in bags, they're throwing things to escape. Those kids don't have pajamas. And we did this drive with collecting pajamas. And it was with my friend Mary, who has since passed. And, I think about her all the time because we had such a kindred spirit of giving to others and wanting to bring that into our children's lives. And later on, my child also took on the drive, and she did all that she did with it, and brought awareness to her schools. And that's what's important. And I think that people listening today, parents who are listening today, there's things that we can do with our own children that can bring awareness. And not only just those moments of empathy, where they're reaching out to you and saying, what can we do? What can we donate? Maybe creating it in their own schools, bringing the awareness. It's not just that the moment of donation is important. We all need that. But awareness is even more. That's doing even more in our communities. I mean, the fact that you're in 50 states is fantastic, but if we can get this out more and more, because those statistics that you were talking about with foster children, that's huge. That's huge.
It is.
It is
And
huge.
the thing is that we have an opportunity to change those numbers.
Yes.
And those kids deserve that.
Yeah.
For so long, our elders would say, invest in a child, you invest in their future. We heard those
Yeah.
people. That's a lie.
Right.
We lie to kids. It's a lie. When you invest in a kid, you invest in my future, in
Right.
your future.
Right.
There are leaders of tomorrow. They deserve this. We've got to get our priorities together. And again, we have to get back to where I can knock on your door and ask you for a cup of sugar and you invite me
Yes.
in for a cup of coffee instead of opening up the door with a gun. What happened to the fact, well, we love thy neighbor? We love thy neighbor. Our world will be better. Our communities get better. We have to love our neighbors.
It's so true, that you say that. So, when my kids were little, we lived in this one neighborhood with this tiny little street, and we had this man who literally was unstable. And if people parked in his area, he would slash tires. And it just wasn't a community. We had two other ones that were fighting, and this was in a beautiful neighborhood. But, my parents' home, had these neighbors, and now we're in this place. My mom was not able to live by herself anymore after my dad had died, and she couldn't live where we were because we were up in the hills. So brought the family together. And the neighborhood we live in now, we do have several people that you can go, hey, I'm right in the middle of something. Do you have a cup of sugar? And it has changed my experience because for years I had it where, it was just kind of isolating, and, I never knew what was going to happen with this neighbor and everything else. And, then I would go visit relatives in New York, and it was funny. I'd walk into their home because they were my husband's family, Italian, and he has half of his family in Italy, half the family in New York. But you'd go to New York and everybody would always say, Kat, you want to come over for coffee and cake? It was always, and I would be like, coffee and cake? Like, that never happens in Los Angeles. What are you talking about? But it's community. And that's exactly what you're talking about, because it's that community feel that brings people together. And it's a feeling of not being alone. And it also gives you a sense of responsibility. During the pandemic, my husband would go out with the gloves and everything to go get our food. And he would, wonder to see if anybody else needed it. And when we have those horrible fires, the Pacific Palisades, we're not far from that.
Oh, yeah.
And we remember it coming over because there's 5 crests from where I am to where that was. And we kept saying, it's not going to come that far, but eventually it started coming over and we got the soft, start getting your stuff together. But then what's happened is people started losing power. And what was a beautiful thing that started happening is we started getting extension cords running because for some reason my house and another house had power. And we just started running these massive extension cords across just so people could have power. But it was beautiful. And I don't think that happens. I know it doesn't happen in most neighborhoods because my other neighborhood, I probably wouldn't have happened. But that's that impact of community that you're talking about, and this is just an extension cord. But what we could do to help children grow up to have stable lives, just that little bit of love. Like you said, that little pair of pajamas that, they can rip off the tag that's theirs and all these things. So tell me this, your story is unbelievable. So I do want to know,
Sure.
with everything that you've said, everything that you've talked about, when you could go back to that young kid, what advice would you give? And what advice would you give to our community and our world of advice that what we could do to help?
First of all, I would tell that young person, I've had this question asked to me
I
quite a
love
bit,
this
and
question, by the way. I love it.
'cause
And
because
I know
I
we've
always have
talked about
different
before.
things.
This is, tell
Yeah,
us.
I
Tell
always have
us.
different things to say to him. I really would like to look at him and say, be your authentic self.
Yeah.
Because for the first probably 18 to 30, I was not my authentic self. And I think I lost a lot of that time because of that. So be my own. And then what I would tell the world. We must understand as humans, that it is in our absolute aura to connect. So when you have a young person who has been brought into the world, and then we don't give them the opportunity to connect, we are doing such a disservice to society.
Yeah.
Because the more children that are disconnected with each other, the more failure our entire civilization is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I say to you all, connect. Find those people to connect. Find those young people. And by the way, not all of you can adopt, not all of you can foster.
Correct.
But every single one of us. See, this is a thing I've said to my kids. We all have a dash. We're going to be given a dash. I don't care if you're male, female, white, black, gay, straight, rich, poor, middle class, whatever. Every single person is given the exact same thing, a dash. We've heard the poem, if you've read it. Mm-hmm. It is the year we are born, our dash, the year we die.
Yes.
I want to remind all of you, make your dash shine. Make it shine. Because when you make your dash shine, our entire civilization is stronger. Make it shine.
Okay.
Be a doer.
That's amazing. I love it. You're choking me up a little bit here. That was beautiful. I want to end here because that was so beautiful. Thank you, Rob, for being here today, being a part of this episode. Wow, that last comment about what you do with that dash in your life is so impactful. Take a moment to realize that it's never too late. If you're not happy with that dash, change it. Make the choice to change. That was beautiful. Be the change in our world. And I think the first thing we can do is start with kindness. Let's be kind to one another. Let's find out where we can help one another. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take any money to be kind. If you have that opportunity to help and reach out, please do so. We're going to put on the chatwithdrkat.com a link to Comfort Cases and to Robert Scheer. If you want to get involved, please do so. This is a wonderful opportunity. But what you can take from today is so much more about what's going on with our children in foster care, children in our own homes. If there's things that you're doing that you don't like, change it. Change it. You can change today. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Have a great rest of your day.